I love this series. I really genuinely do. And I have loved every single book in the series. I have loved the journey that this series has taken me on. And I want nothing more than to hold this book up, the finale of this series, and tell you that it is a 5-star book. It is wonderful. It is perfection. It sticks the landing in every conceivable way. I just can't quite say that. And what I can say is that Christopher Ruocchio takes everything that he's done in the series up until now and shoves it to 11. And that then in turn made this book an interesting experience because it gave you some of the biggest moments, some of the coolest moments, some of the coolest reveals in the entire series. It also at the same time made reading this book a little frustrating. It's kind of like when you're mixing music, and you may not have mixed music before, but kind of bear with me and go with me on this, and I'll try to explain what I'm talking about. You've got your faders on your little mixing board set. Everything sounds perfect. It sounds great. It's really going good. And then you want to like punch everything up for, say, the chorus or something like that. And you're really going to push those faders up. Some faders have to go more than others do because certain frequencies do well when pushed and other frequencies don't do well when they're pushed, because certain frequencies, when they're turned up too loud, are grating on your ear and they're just kind of irritating to listen to. So there's a little bit of delicacy and nuance to how far you push the different volumes as you go. And in this one, he just said, all of them up, and it didn't mix well when they all got dialed up that far. And there's a whole lot more to what made this book frustrating for me personally to read than just that, but that's the easiest and most obvious way to put it, and what stood out the most to me as I was reading the book. Now, what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to give a very small non-spoiler section and my rating for the book before I launch into an extended spoiler section, because at this point we're in book 7 of a series. There's not a whole lot that I'm going to be able to say about this without spoiling for you. And if you have made it somehow 6 books into a 7-book series and you're on the fence as to whether or not you're going to read the 7th book, I'm not sure I can help you with that. So anyway, of course we are talking about Shadows Upon Time by Christopher Ruocchio, book 7 in the Sun Eater series. Now, this book is really good. It really, really is. I don't want to give the wrong impression here the further I get into this review, like I'm somehow negative on this book. I'm really not. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. I recommend the series. Nothing about my experience or what I'm getting ready to say in this video is going to take away from that. It is amazing. The world building is just ticked up a notch. The world building is one of the greatest things. Improvements, not that the world building in the previous books was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but he ups the ante in the world building in this and just really dials it up. And that was one of my favorite things about this book, is the advancements in the world building just were kind of blowing my mind there for a good chunk of the book. And the creep factor is up, and the horror factor is up, and just that atmosphere. If there's one thing that Ruocchio does in spades, it is atmosphere. And the intense visuals that you get when you're reading one of his books is just mind-blowing. Even more mind-blowing once you realize Christopher himself can't actually visualize in his mind, which doesn't make any sense to me considering just how intensely visual his writing is. How do you do that without not being able to see things? I don't fucking know, but he does, and it's done spectacularly. And just leaning into the weird factor and the creepy factor and just the strangeness of some of the things that he adds into these stories. Like Orphan had some of the coolest things happening with his character. Just any scene with him in it and the banter between the two heads, just creepy, strange stuff. And I loved it. I was all in for any of it. And that guy, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, the one that lives in a tank and he's kind of like trying to make himself immortal, and he's been around for thousands of years, and he can communicate with the chip and all of the, whatever his name was. Just any scene he was in was just super creepy and intense, and I just loved it. I adored it. I ate it up. With all of that being said, Christopher also has a really strong flair from melodrama. And this isn't new. This is something that has been going on through the entire series, book 1 up until now, but that's another one where he dialed that to 11, and that one could have probably been left alone. If you maybe had an issue with some of the waxing that Hadrian would go on, or maybe the preachiness that some people would even call it, that Hadrian has been going through these books, buckle up. I will say, though, that I think Christopher Ruocchio has become a better writer over the course of this series. I felt a lot more of the emotions that he wanted me to feel in this book, whereas a long time ago, I don't remember which review I said it in, but I said that I wish that I felt as strongly the emotions that Hadrian says that he feels, because he's always going on about how important an event was to him in his life, but I never felt that importance in the actual text of the book because there was something missed in translation. I didn't get the emotional impact of characters and character deaths and losses, especially in the first couple of books. Hadrian always said, oh, it was so important, but I never felt that importance in the narrative. I'm getting much, much, much more of that now in the end books, which just tells me that Christopher has grown as a writer and he's doing a much better job of conveying the emotions directly to me that I'm supposed to be experiencing. And as much as I liked this book, and some parts of it were truly, genuinely great, it was also, like I said in the opening, quite frustrating to read. I felt like it was overly long for what it is and what it's doing. I felt like the story was going in circles there for a while. A lot of the conversations that we were having were going in circles, and we kept having the same conversation over and over again. Some of the ideas felt either unfinished or just not taken to their logical conclusion. And then for one reason or another, a lot of different aspects of the book were unsatisfying up to and including the actual ending of the book. I don't know how to say that. I'm going to ultimately give the book a 7. Like I said, above average. It was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed so much. The parts I enjoyed them so intensely that it overpowers any and all of the drawbacks to keep it away from a negative review or even being an average book. It was an above average book. It was an enjoyable read. But there were just so many things in there that I just can't give it much higher than that. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to launch into the spoiler section of this video. And I want you to understand just how much I like this book and how much I like this series, and really the investment that I have had over the past 6 books to get to this one, the investment I had going into this one, and just all of my built-up excitement to get to the finale of this series and how invested I was going into it because of my built-in love for the series, love for what's happening, all of the development. I was locked in, so locked in. And that is why I've made the reluctant decision to focus the spoiler section on the negative and what was so frustrating for me about this book. And I want to do that just because I kind of need to process it, to be quite honest. I need to get it out. I need to vent about a few things. And that's just kind of where my brain is stuck, because I was so hyped, because I was so excited, because I was so ready for this to be a 10. And I'm stuck on all of the things that frustrated me to no end. So I'm going to focus the spoiler section on my frustrations, which probably, I'm sure by the end of this, is going to feel like I'm shitting on this book. And I want you to know now, before I start, that is not the case. I'm not shitting on this. This book is really, really good. But I kind of need to process my frustrations. And you are welcome to come with me on this journey. Otherwise, if you thought it was a 10 and you're not ready for this, maybe back out. So like I said, the book felt like it was too long and it was going in circles. We had a whole conversation, even in the last book, when he met God and what God is and how all of this works and the metaphysics of the universe and this idea of God. We come back to it in this book. We have the conversation about God again. We'll come back a little bit later. We're going to have the conversation about God again. It kind of feels like we're just doing that over and over again while not that's one of the ones that kind of doesn't go to its logical conclusion. At least Hadrian doesn't get to the logical conclusion on that one, but I'll get to that in just a second. Then we're going to meet up with the emperor, and we need to have a conversation with him. And he's going to tell Hadrian, you're going to rule the empire with Selene afterwards. And then we're going to go off to do the big end battle thing. But that battle wraps up, and it doesn't actually end anything. We kind of aren't actually... It wraps up, but the book's not over yet, because first we need to go back to the emperor. We need to have a conversation with the emperor, and he's going to explain to Hadrian that you're going to rule the empire with Selene, and then we're going to go off to do the big end battle, which is what we just did, kind of, but the battle was different, and that one didn't go through okay. But the conversation with the emperor the first time was, well, Selene's going to be the empress, and you're just going to rule next to her. This conversation was, no, now you're going to be the emperor, and she'll just kind of be next to you, which is the same thing, because he would have been basically telling Selene what to do the entire time around the first time. So the whole having that conversation a second time was really just semantics. We achieved really nothing, like, other than edging Hadrian into accepting that he's the ruler of the empire now. I don't know why we're having this conversation so many times in a row. It was like I said, talk to the emperor, realize I'm going to rule the empire, go to finish the thing. But now we need to talk to the emperor. He's going to tell me I'm going to rule things, and then we're going to go finish things. It's like, why are we doing this? We're literally just doing the story in circles. Just for the big climactic battle to actually happen. The stage has been set for Hadrian to actually take over, and then he just decides instead, you know what? I think I'll just give up. The circular storytelling also extends to Lorien, who comes in and he swoops in to help Hadrian in some big, Deus Ex Machina style, a friend coming to save the day situation, just for him and Hadrian to have a conversation where Lorien vows to leave and never help Hadrian again. Just for Hadrian to call out for help with Lorien. He doesn't show up, looks like he's not going to make it, and then out of nowhere Lorien shows up and saves the day, just for him and Hadrian to have a conversation about how Lorien will never help him again and go away. Just for Hadrian to call Lorien for help again. It doesn't look like Lorien's going to make it in time, just for him to swoop in and save the day at the last minute. And this isn't even the first time or the first book that has been a plot device that has been used, and we're going to use it literally a couple times in this book. I'm like, why? What are we doing here? And on the topic of Lorien, because thinking about Lorien kind of leads me directly into one of my other complaints, which is unfinished ideas or things that weren't taken to their logical conclusion, or what I perceive could have, should have, would have been the logical conclusion. Let's make that clear. Either Hadrian or the book itself doesn't follow through on some of these thought processes and doesn't complete them. And there is something to be said for having certain conversations and certain dialogues and then leaving the topic open-ended so that you can continue to think about it and mull over it and not really coming down on one side of the line or the other. There's something to be said for leaving things open-ended. This, on the other hand, these conversations didn't feel like they were intentionally left open-ended. They just kind of felt unfinished. And there is a difference. The book is also saying a lot about a lot of different things while somehow simultaneously feeling like it's not 100% sure what it's trying to actually say. Let's start with Lorien. Hadrian was raised. From the time he was born, he was trained to believe in certain types of prejudices. And mutants are bad, and mutants are lesser citizens, and cybernetics are evil, and we should never bind our bodies to machines. That's gross and that's awful. And he expresses those prejudices over and over and over and over again throughout the series. And we're waiting for the moment when he's going to triumphantly overcome these baked in prejudices that he has been born and raised with, because he sides with Valka, and we realize that, she has this cybernetic implant, which takes him a long time to come to terms with. And his best friend, one of his best friends, Lorien, is a mutant who should be a second-class citizen, but he's also brilliant. And then he goes off and he's disgusted by Lorien when he finds out that he walks tall now because he's had all these implants put in to make him function like a normal person. He's these nerve implants. And it upsets Hadrian that his friend would bind himself to these horrible things just to make himself function like a normal person. And then come to find out towards the end of all of this, we learn that Lorien only exists in this horrible mutant form because the Empire made him that way on purpose through this weird genetics program that they've been pushing. So at this point, we're thinking the logical conclusion to this is going to be Hadrian ripping that infrastructure down, taking it down, accepting Lorien and all these weird cybernetic people and all of these mutants and all of these people who've had to do what they've had to do to survive in this weird fucked up situation that the Empire's put them in, oppressively so. And you'd think, okay, we're going to pull this system down and we're going to raise these people up and equality will reign king and we're going to dispatch the prejudices. Not really. We come to this real half-assed conclusion of Hadrian declaring to Lorien that all people will be welcome in my empire. You and all the freaks of you will be welcome and you will no longer be shunned. This is all good, great, and fine. But then at the same time, he's like, also, I think we're going to keep the breeding program and all of that shit because, necessary evil and all that stuff. And I'm like, wait, what? We're doing what now? We're going to keep what? I don't know. That was weird. And yes, at the end of the book, we do end up wiping out the genetic key or the Emperor's clone brother. So now the genetics breeding program is no more, and we can move forward without this weird set of genetics and breeding programs and making the noble houses palatine and great. But if they step out and do something they're not supposed to do, we're going to make you mutants and make you all fucked up, so that ultimately does at the end of the day get dismantled like you would expect it to, like you would want it to. But it's not because of some noble decision made by Hadrian. It's because the dude runs out into the square and gets shot. That's not. So you kind of want Hadrian to be the beacon of morals moving into the future, and he's like, no, I think I'll keep that program. Yep, that's going to be my leverage over my empire too. And and it gets taken out by happenstance, not by any real decision our main character is actually actively making. Actually, the only active decision that Hadrian makes in the end of the book is to give up and just kind of throw in the towel. I think I've done enough. I killed the Cielson. I blew up a star. I think those were what my visions told me I was good for. So I think I could just call it a day now, right? And then there's the conversation about religion. And this is another just nitpick, but it just irritated me the whole time. Every time somebody in the book would come up to Hadrian, like one of the Catholics, and they'd be like, oh my God, you've spoken to God? And he'd be like, you just get frustrated, and he'd be like, your God is not my God. And he was really adamant that his God was not their God, even though we literally just had biblically accurate angels show up in the last book. And he's still adamant that his God is not there. They're different. They're completely different. I'm thinking, actually, if you kind of take a step back and you look at it, Hadrian, I think the Catholics are probably more close to being on the right path than you are. And I honestly thought for a while he's going to come around on this one and he'll be like, you know what? There's a lot more depth and nuance to this conversation, and go up to one of those Catholics that declared that, Edward or somebody like that, and be like, I think my God is actually your God, but your people were only seeing bits and pieces and fragments of what my God actually is. And then they were attempting to make sense of something they couldn't see and couldn't comprehend. But what I see is the whole picture. I get the completeness of it. So your God is not necessarily wrong. And your God, you were seeing this thing and all of these things because they saw biblically accurate angels. They wrote about them before in the BC times, put them in the Bible and everything, just for them to show up and disquiet gods, and then Hadrian to be like, but your God is not my God. And I'm like, there is so much nuance there to just shut the conversation down with what feels like the wrong perspective. His weird insistence on my God is clearly not your God just feels stubborn, short-sighted, and, to be honest, at times almost stupid. And out of all of the conversations that we've had that go over and over and round in circles, that one felt one of the most unfinished of the conversations. And the whole time, I feel like the Catholics were on the right, more of the right path than Hadrian was. And Hadrian's the one who talked to God. I don't know. It was just weird to me. Stubborn and weird for our main character. And then, of course, Hadrian giving up at the end of the books felt really strange. We literally, like I said earlier, we have multiple conversations about him taking over the empire. The emperor does all of this. Literally, we go back to the emperor like 2 or 3 times to set up this whole, you're going to take over the empire, you're going to do this, the empire that. And we go back and we circle that so many times. Couple 100 pages we circle this idea just for him to be like, yeah, fuck it, I guess I'll just quit. You know, I've done enough. And it's just not a satisfying ending. It was weird. It was strange. It was a hard left turn. And even after the main end climactic battle, we get to this conversation that then feels like it in and of itself is going in circles, because what are we going to do with the Chantry and the Earth? Are we going to raid the Earth? Are we going to take it down? Are we going to blow it up from afar? Are we going to take this out? What are we doing with this dark, evil shadow empire, the Chantry? And this conversation goes round and round and round and round in circles just for him to decide not to blow it up. I'm going to go there. And then we get there and big surprise, shock twist, Alexander's there and the Chantry's there, and now they're surrounded. So what do we do now? I guess I'll just give up. I'm done. Fuck it. It's over. And after what felt like going in circles for so much of the book, it just wasn't a really satisfying note to land on. Then, I'm not done yet apparently, there's just a lack of growth or evolution on Hadrian's part. He, all the way to the bitter end, he's just Hadrian. And he never really gains too much agency or too much force. He's always really afraid to do the thing that he knows he needs to do, or what he's had visions of, or he's always kind of meek and doesn't want to make the hard decision. He's kind of pushed into making the hard decision, and he will kind of hold off to the last second until somebody kind of really convinces him he has no choice. But he never really is just like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the... Like, we were sold on the idea of what if becoming Darth Vader was the right thing to do, and at no point does he become Darth Vader. He does authorize the pulling of the trigger, but that's not the same thing as becoming Darth Vader. I expected something, a hardened man making really hard decisions, maybe doing something utterly fucked up, like by the end of it, like maybe when he realizes that he's stranded in the end on that planet, and he's standing there, and he's Hadrian Marlowe. He can walk through hyperspace. He could have walked up and just snapped Alexander and the Chantry's necks, or sliced him with his sword, ended it right then and there. Of course, we would have caused a power vacuum, but he's already got his daughter and the Jad and other people set up in order to kind of take place in that vacuum, kind of already step in and keep it from collapsing entirely. Now, what would this have done? It would have basically forfeit Selene right then and there. How fucked up would that have been? Like, awful, but that would have been Hadrian making a fucked up hard decision, like, really, I'm going to ultimately take down this shadow empire. I'm going to take down this evil dictator, this piece of shit Alexander, but in order to do it, I'm going to have to sacrifice somebody. And but instead he's like, no, I think I'll just go get hung and call it a day. still, what happens to Celine there? We don't know. She gets to live, but it's probably not a great life. I don't know. I was just, something could have happened that I don't know. Not that. Then, oh my God, I can't. Then I'm going to do one more thing. The final pages of the book is Hadrian being hung, and we end the book on Hadrian's death, which we already know that he's telling these stories himself. He's writing them from a distant time and in the future. So we know that he comes back. Like, it doesn't feel super impactful or important, him dying in the final phrase of the book, because we know that he just comes back from the Howling Dark, writes his books, and goes on living as like nothing happened. So having the big final impact of the last scene of the book being Hadrian dying feels almost like the author wanted to have his cake and eat it too, but it robs both of them of, maybe not both of them, but it robs the hanging of any real weight. It robs Hadrian's death of any real weight. Even, let's go back to my last hypothesis. If Hadrian would have done something wild, like going after Alexander and killing him in the chantry, and Celine gets killed and he dies in the process of that, that would have had much more, in my opinion, weight to it, because there were consequences to that, like real massive. I don't know. I'm just throwing shit out here. I could be crazy, and that could not actually make any logical sense. My point is, I don't know. I was frustrated. It frustrated me. And this is really just, like I said in the beginning, me processing my frustration, because I really did enjoy it, and I really did like it. It upped the ante, it upped the world building, it upped my investment in so many different things of the book, and I really did have a good time. But I kind of needed to vent for a minute, because I don't know. Anyway, everybody, how did you feel, and what did you think of the books? As always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.